10 books that predicted the future. There's an entire industry that revolves around the activity of predicting the future. Indeed, it would be exciting to know one's future. Some learning peoples challenge the authenticity of these predictions and premonitions. There are a few things in this world which even science cannot answer, which only adds to the mystery. We will not go into any sort of debate here. Do you know that there has been some writers who, while penning down their imagination, predicted the world's biggest events, achievements, and calamities long before they occurred in the real world? In this video, we're going to talk about 10 books that are believed to have predicted the future. So if you're interested, please keep watching. Number 1. The Wreck of the Titan. Who does not know about the sinking of Unsinkable? Yes, the Titanic? The tragic sinking of the giant luxurious cruise liner took away 1,500 plus lives. This tragedy was predicted in 2 different novels written at 2 different times, much before the accident. The description and details matching with the actual incident are bizarre and uncanny, and they leave you wondering if the authors were predicting the future. Morgan Robertson wrote The Wreck of the Titan, or Futility, in 1898. It was a story of an ocean liner sinking in the North Atlantic after hitting an iceberg. Exactly 14 years later, the Titanic sunk in the same place and in the same way. In the novel, the ship's name was Titan, which hit an iceberg in the Atlantic Ocean and sank. The Titan was just like the Titanic, described as the largest ship afloat at that time. The size, length, and speed of both the ships were similar. In this story, the Titan was both dubbed Unsinkable and proceeded to sink on a cold April night. Both ocean liners had a dangerous shortage of lifeboats. Number 2. From Earth to the Moon. It is very surprising that a novel written 100 years before the first man landed on the moon for the first time had a lot of similarities with the actual journey to the moon in 1969. Jules Verne, in his novel From Earth to the Moon, written in 1865, mentioned a launch site in Florida. Back then, the construction of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida had not even been thought of. The other similarities between the book and the launch of the 1969 Apollo 11 included the same number of passengers, both in the book and reality. There were 3 passengers on board. Worth mentioning is the fact that Jules Verne, in his novel, predicted the phenomena of weightlessness as an experience of the astronauts in space. Number 3. Depth of Honor. Tom Clancy is always known for writing with a great sense of authenticity. One such example is in his 1994 novel Depth of Honor, in which terrorists take out most of the US government officials and politicians by flying a commercial plane into a joint session of Congress in the Capitol. This is the first time anybody had expressed the idea of hijacking a commercial airliner for a suicide terrorist attack through words. 7 years later, on September 11, a similar hijacking and attack on the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center gave people shivers across the globe. Considered to be as one of the blackest days for Americans, the 9/11 incident put Clancy under suspicion. In the aftermath of the attacks, CNN called him to comment on the similarity between the plane crash depicted in the novel and the crash of United Flight 93. Number 4. The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Another classic example of literary prophecy is Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. It is Poe's only complete novel of his career. In the story, he predicted a man named Richard Parker would be one of 4 survivors of a shipwreck and would be cannibalized by the other 3 survivors. 46 years later, the ship called Mignonette sank, leaving only 4 survivors. The 4th one was Richard Parker, who was eaten by his fellow survivors to satisfy their hunger. Number 5. Brave New World. According to historian Michael Bess, Brave New World is a legendary science fiction novel without a flaw. He worries that Aldous Huxley may have penned one of the most accurate sci-fi visions of our future. In the 1930s era, this book talks of the unbelievable concepts like bioengineered people, artificial wombs, society sorted into castes, casual sex, and people depending on emotion-altering drugs. To name a few, the invention of antidepressants happened in the 1950s, whereas Brave New World was written much before that in 1932. Aldous Huxley described a society dependent on psychoactive drug that can induce calmness while subduing malice and bad tempers. These days, it is common for Ritalin to be prescribed to boisterous children, while the use of prescription antidepressant has soared among adults. Huxley did accurately depict several aspects of contemporary culture, including our consumerist-heavy society. On reading, we can say that Huxley warned us against the dangers of being oppressed by our amusement, meaning we use endless streams of entertainment to distract ourselves and fail to engage with real life. Does that ring a bell when doctors tell us to reduce screen time for our kids and prescribe reduced working time on laptops? Number 6. The machine stops. We all know the feeling when the internet does not work, or our laptop crashes, or our mobile phone faces technical or physical damages. Our life is so unthinkable or unimaginable without these or other gadgets. But for E.M. Foster, predicting humans' dependency on multiple screens way back in 1909 is a miracle. He wrote his character's dependency on video calling in his novel, The Machine Stops. Apart from discussing larger social issues, it was the first novel that predicted a technology akin to Skype and modern-day video chatting. He wrote that it was fully 15 seconds before the round plate that she held in her hands began to glow. A faint blue light shot across it, darkening to purple, and presently she could see the image of her son, who lived on the other side of the earth, and he could see her. While talking about unbelievable technology, he showed the human's reception of it. It is the story of a mother and son living in a post-apocalyptic world. It is a world where travel is rare, inhabitants communicate via video screens, and people have become so reliant on the machine that they have begun to worship it. Doesn't it strike a familiar chord to today's COVID-19 pandemic period? The novel was Foster's first and only foray into science fiction, and it was a brilliant literary piece and scientific prophecy. Number 7. Stand on Zanzibar. The list is incomplete without mentioning a sci-fi by John Brunner entitled Stand of Zanzibar. Belonging to the times when wireless still meant radio, careful observation, listening, and reading, combined with his zany imagination, resulted in Stand of Zanzibar. Written in 1968, he foresees mass killers, labeling them muckers. His vision of 2010 was eerily accurate. Brunner, in his novel, imagines the formation of the EU, the economic decline of Detroit, and the rise in global terrorism. Governments confronting population control, wearable technology, Viagra, video calls, gay marriage, the illegalization of cannabis, and the proliferation of mass shootings were other key prophecies standing true today. Number 8. Neuromancer. When the internet was limited to the use of just a handful of people, William Gibson coined the term cyberspace. The American-born novelist, in his book Neuromancer, published 36 years ago, popularized the idea of cyberspace, a consensual hallucination created by millions of connected computers. Greedy urban clinics carry out horrendous-sounding plastic surgery. A junkie hacker case is coaxed into hacking the system of a major corporation. What once seemed impossibly futuristic is now eerily familiar. The cultural influence of his novel Neuromancer also popularized the term Matrix in the way it's understood in the Matrix films. Since the late 70s, he has been right about predicting the shape of the internet and how it filters down to the lowest strata of society. According to critics, Gibson can be said to have helped shape our conception of the internet. Every social network, online game, or hacking scandal takes us a step closer to the universe Gibson imagined in 1984. Number 9. The Mars Project. Wernher von Braun wrote the Mars Project, which is a technical specification for a manned expedition to Mars. Written originally in German in 1948 under the title Das Mars Project, the book was later translated into English. It is often described as the most influential book on planning human missions to Mars, and has been quoted several times since for predicting the future with remarkable accuracy. The book presents for the first time a technically comprehensive design for an expedition of such a scale. The book envisions a rocket that can be reused for the journey to Mars. The design resembles closely with that of Falcon Heavy from SpaceX. The book also said that human colonists on Mars were led by a person called Elon. Surprisingly, South African-Canadian engineer and technology entrepreneur Elon Musk founded his company SpaceX in 2002. Apart from space tourism and other projects, Elon Musk at SpaceX plans to build a colony on Mars by 2040. And finally, number 10. Two different writers, Dean Koontz and Sylvia Browne, at two different points in time, i.e. 1981 and 2004, talk about a world afflicted by a pandemic that is caused by a virus. Before closing the list, we would like to mention two books that predicted a pandemic. Recently, after the onset of COVID-19, there was a popular message forwarded on social media claiming that the book The Eyes of Darkness, written by Dean Koontz, had predicted the occurrence of COVID-19 pandemic. This was based on an excerpt from the book which mentions a virus, Wuhan 400, that was developed in a lab on the outskirts of the city Wuhan. However, that's where the similarity between the two ends. The symptoms and patterns of Wuhan 400 are very different from COVID-19. Sylvia Browne, an author and a self-proclaimed psychic, in her book End of Days, Predictions and Prophecies about the End of the World, predicts a pandemic. In her book, she prophesies about a pneumonia-like disease that will spread across the globe in the year 2020. The disease, according to her, will vanish as fast as it appeared, and then will return after a gap of 10 years. The Earth certainly got afflicted by a pandemic in 2010, as she foretold.